And now it's recording everything?
Everything that's on this screen, whatever you show on there. So if you swipe over and use a REPL on there, that'll get recorded too.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
I think this is a mirror of this one, by the way. I'm not using the extension.
Oh, okay, gotcha.
So it should do the full screen on this one, right?
Yeah, totally.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
That's what we care about. Awesome. Thanks, John.
Yeah.
Cool. All right, so we'll just get started today. I think we're waiting for a few other people, but hopefully they'll trickle in and then they won't miss too much. First, can everyone see the board? The most important thing. We turn off the lights. Let me know if it gets distracting or if it makes everyone drowsy. I know it's getting late, but cool. All right, so today we'll be talking about arrays, which essentially are just lists. This is really exciting, and actually arrays are actually a fundamental data structure in JavaScript. So it's very important, and pretty soon you'll see the power of arrays and why it's probably one of the most common data structures being used. So I mentioned earlier that arrays are just lists. So what are the main reasons why we make lists? Just throw out reasons for why we make lists and why we choose a list as a way for us to capture certain information. Throw them out there. Why do we make lists, people? Why do we make lists, right? Like, let's say you're going shopping, right? And you make a list of all things you need to buy. You're going to a party, you make a guest list. Why do we make lists? Okay, not to forget something, which means that we want to make sure that we can keep multiple things kind of in one place, right? So we know kind of what we need to do or what we need to be able to reference down the road, right? What's another reason why we make lists?
To keep things organized?
Keep things organized in what way? Sure, right. So before we kind of dive that deep into the programming part of it, lists are also important because a lot of times they give us an order in which we do things, right? If you make a list of 10 things you want to do today, they may be ranked in order of importance, from most important to least important. So you know exactly in what order you're going to be doing certain things. And in fact, ordering is actually very important, and it's one of the reasons why people use arrays, is because arrays maintain this sense of order. As in, if I go to an array, I know what's going to come first, I know what comes next, and then later, and then later, and later. So array helps us maintain this very valuable sense of sequence and order, which you'll see soon why that's important. So the problem that, that one of the most common problems we can use when we think of an array is, let's say I want to create, I want to create 4 variables, right? Here are all the people who are invited to this very exciting party that I'm having. It's me, my mom, my dad, and my dog, right? Now, we could very easily just make 4 variables like so, and this is perfectly valid. But if I wanted to contain these 4 in one place, right, so I can refer to this collection of guests, it's going to be pretty tedious for me to keep saying, all right, now do this to me, my dog, my mom, and my dad. And then somewhere else, if I want to maybe print out this list, I would need to say, all right, print out me, my mom, my dog, and my dad. If I want to say how many guests do I have, I would need to count me, my mom, my dog, and my guests. So it gets very tedious very quickly when you try to reference all these things individually, right? So an array is basically something that we can create that can actually hold a bunch of different other variables for us. So in this case, I can create one list that's just called my party, right? And in this list can be these 4 things, right? It can be me, my mom, my dad, and my dog. But now I have this single collection that I can use to refer to everything out. So I have this single collection that I can use to refer to everything at once. And so this is an example of the first thing that we brought up when we said, why do we make lists? It's so that we know we don't forget anything. It's so that we have a reference to this entire collection of variables. Problems with lists, or not really problems, but what are the most important things we need to think about when we make a list, right? It's one, how do I add and remove people, right? Because lists are something that are mutable in the sense that I can add people, I can remove people, I can shift things around, I can shift things around, I can replace values. So there is this chance that I can change this. And so how do I change that list is something that we need to consider. And then secondly is, how can I access each person's name without knowing each individual variable? And so this brings back to what someone mentioned earlier about indexes, and we'll kind of dive a little bit deeper into what indexes are. But for now, just know that because we have a list, I can say, hey, tell me the 3rd thing on your list, right? I may not know what it is, but I know if your list is 10 things long, that there's going to be a 3rd thing, right? As well as a 4th and 5th and so on. And so what this so something else that we need to be careful, or we need to think about when we make a list is how do I create these references to these objects, or sorry, to these variables without necessarily having to reference them directly. Everything make sense so far? We good? Okay, cool. So what is an array? Array is a list of values. So here is a list that we made earlier, right, of our party, right? So now we have this array called people. And in it, we have 4 things. We have me, my mom, my dad, and my dog. In this case, we're using them as string values. We could also very easily, if I go back earlier to our current thing, we define person 1, person 2, person 3, and person 4. We could very also make those the variables inside of our arrays. So any data types that we've covered so far, right, whether it be numbers or booleans or strings or variables, like any of these, we can put inside of a list. We can put inside of an array. And one thing you actually see down the road is that we can also put other arrays inside of arrays to create something we call nested arrays. Cool. So what does it mean when I say an array, or what does it actually look like? So this is the very basics of an array syntax. Arrays basically require 2 things. Or actually, no, they require two things. They require an opening bracket and a closing bracket. Okay, so that tells JavaScript, okay, everything that's between these 2 brackets is going to be part of my array. Okay, and the way that we separate each thing in an array is by a comma. And the reason why we don't necessarily need commas in an array is I could very easily have an array of one thing, right? I would have no commas, and that's perfectly valid. Arrays can be as long as you want. Arrays can be empty. That's also a very valid value for arrays. Indexes. So earlier we mentioned how do we reference the things inside of an index. So if I was to tell you to make a list of 10 countries you want to visit over the course of your life, right? You would start with 1, the name of the country, 2, the name of the country, etc. And lists operate the very same way, except for a computer, we start at the 0, right? So we would do 0 as the first value, and you would list the country that you want to visit. And then you would do 1, 2, 3, 4, all the way until 9 if you were making a list of 10. So one of the things that we need to be careful about here is that whenever we're talking about a list, the actual length of a list is going to be more than the highest index in a list, right? So in this case, we have a list of 4 things. So if I was to ask you how long is this list, you would say 4, but the highest index is only going to be 3 because we're counting 0 as our default first item in our list. Good? Cool. So now that we've created our list and we know how to reference certain things, the next question is, great, how do we actually reference those things, right? And so what we do it through something called bracket notation. So earlier we made this array. Well, this is a different array, but essentially, array 2, 3, and 4, right? It's an array with 3 numbers in it. If I want to get the first element in this list, by passing in the index. So this is the array, right? And so bracket notation means that basically I'm passing in, I'm taking the variable and I'm putting brackets after it, and I'm putting the index I want to access after it, right? So in this case, what this is saying is, for this array variable, give me the item that is in the 0th index. Remember, 0th index corresponds to the first item in the array, right? And so here, when we talk about the 0th index, the value is 2. And then 3 for the first index, which is the second value. And then finally, 4, which is the index 2, which is the third item. These are really bad examples. They're numbers and they make things confusing. But hopefully you get the point that this has 3 items, and the indexes to access any one of these 3 are 0, 1, and 2. Okay? What if I try to access a value that's not in my array, right? So I have a list of 3 things, and I say, give me the 4th thing, right? Remember what Sean talked about on Tuesday. When something has not yet been defined, the data type for it is undefined, right? So when I say give me in this case, it'll be give me the 4th item at the 3rd index in your list, what JavaScript can tell us is that, hey, look, this thing, it is theoretically there, but you haven't defined it, you haven't given a value yet, so what we're going to give you back is undefined. Okay? So everything, these first, 4 bullet points after this definition are how we access arrays and what we get back from it. One of the other things we talked about as a major feature of lists is, great, once I have my list, how do I then go back and change, right? How do I change a value, right? If I say, hey, I want to maybe I did visit this country recently, right? I want to take it off my list and I want to replace it with another country. How do I do that? Very, very easy. It's the same way we do any kind of assignment in JavaScript. We use the single equal sign. So here we have array of 0, right? Before array of 0, if we just did array of 0, it would give us 2. But now we're saying array of 0 equals 5. So now what we're saying is, all right, array, go to your zeros, index your first item here, right? Take this 2 and assign it to be a 5, right? And so now the array, if we print it out, it's going to look like 5, 3, 4. Good? Does that make sense of how this happened or how we changed this array? Cool. And then if I was to say, hey, we know array of 3 previously was undefined because it didn't exist, but now we can create it. We can say, all right, your fourth item is going to be 6. And now when we print the array, it's going to be 5, 3, 4, and 6 because we've just created a new item in this array. Okay? Everything good so far? We're going to build on top of this. So if something isn't clear right now, let me know and we can kind of walk through it a little more slowly.
So
yes.
Then it follows that like everything in the square brackets when you're trying to access an index, it has to evaluate to a number.
Yes, for an array, yes. And the reason, so like, this is something that I can show you guys later in the repo. But everything in JavaScript is technically an object, and so you can like put whatever you want in that notation, but it will exist outside of this array format. So I can show you what that looks like, but for the purposes of understanding arrays, yes, your indexes should be numbers. Now, it could be an expression that evaluates to a number, right? If I say, give me array of 0 plus 1, 0 plus 1 is going to evaluate to 1. It's going to say, all right, here's 1, right? In fact, I can put other variables in here that are also equals numbers, right? So up here, if I have var x equals 3, and then I say, give me array index of x, it's going to say x equals 3, array of 3 equals 4, and we're going to get 4 again. Right? So it doesn't necessarily have to be a number directly, but it has the expression has to evaluate to a number at the end of the day. Okay, looping through arrays. What do you mean when I say looping through an array, right? Let's just say very simply, I have my guest list from earlier, and now I want to do something with every single item in that array. In this case, if I want to say, hey, here's my guest list for my party, I want to send everyone an invite, right? Previously, if we have 4 separate variables, we could say, all right, for me, send me an invite. For my dog, send them an invite. For my mom, for my dad, et cetera, and go down the line. But now we have a list. We have a sequence of objects. So we're going to say, all right, start at the first thing, do this, and don't stop until you get to the very end. Okay? Conceptually, I think that's a pretty straightforward way of figuring out how it's going to loop, right? And so when we loop something, you guys have used for loops before, right? Cool. So typically speaking, for an array, for now, to keep it simple, we'll say we want to start at the very beginning, and we want to go until the very end. Okay, so we're going to go left to right, beginning to end. And we don't have to, but for this example, we will. So the first thing we want to do is, all right, what's like the variable, quote unquote, that we're using to keep track of our progress, right? And we'll start at 0. Why 0? Exactly, because the first index of of the array is going to be 0, right? So we're going to start at 0, which tells us, all right, when we start iterating, for now at least, we're going to start here in this first item, okay? Then I do I is less than people.length. Why is it less than?
Because the last item will be 1 less than the total length.
Exactly. The index of the last item is going to be less than the length. Remember that. This is a length of 4. My dog is going to be index of 3, right? So if I say I is less than or equal to people.length, it will be I is less than or equal to 4. So at some point, I is going to equal 4. We're going to try to do something to this list, and this list is going to say, I don't have an index 4. I only have index 3 as my highest number, right? And so that's why we do less than, is because we want to reach the very end. We don't want to go past. We don't want to go past the endpoint of our list. And then I++ just means for every time we go through this iteration down here, we're just going to add 1 more to I, right? So I is going to equal 0. We're going to go through the loop once. I will now equal 1, so on and so on, until we violate this condition of I is less than 4, right? So basically, as soon as I reaches 3, we're going to do this loop 1 more time, and then I will become 4, and we'll say, oh, this no longer holds true. We're done with our loop, which also means we've reached the end of our list. Okay? And each time that we do it, in this case, we're doing very simply, we're just console logging, right? And we're saying people here, right? Our array from earlier, and we're passing to it a variable I, right? Remember, variable i's are indexed, right? So we're just saying for each time that we go through, we're saying each time we go through this loop, print out for me in this array what is at this index. And I know this index is always going to be valid because once again, remember the criteria set, right? I start at 0 and I go less than the length. So I know that every one of these should return an actual value. Is everyone clear on how this for loop is working and how we're going through this, how we're traversing through this array? Very, very good. Cool. All right. So now that we have a list of one single thing that we've done, right? Now what we were talking about is, one thing I mentioned earlier is, remember, we can also put any data type in an array, including other arrays, right? So if you guys like read Mashable or BuzzFeed, right, they have like these articles are essentially lists of other lists, which is one like a really cheap way to like get clicks and just generate content, right? Because you don't have to do any work yourself. But also it represents that we can have like nested information inside of other lists, and so forth and so forth, right? So when we look at this, like this is meant to kind of be like maybe a little bit sarcastic, but this is valid JavaScript syntax, right? We have a list of one thing, which is the first item in another list, and so on, all the way to get to the very top. This is valid. Like this is an actual legitimate data structure in JavaScript. So normally we do one-dimensional. Sorry, I skipped this earlier. Cool. But if I wanted to check to see if something is an array or not, there's two things that we want to do. There's two ways to do this. One of them I like more than the other, right? So the two types are there's a type of operator, and then there's the array is array operator. So I think you asked a question earlier, right, of does the expression always have to evaluate to a number? And I said that all arrays are objects. If I pass an array into a type of operator, it will say, it won't be able to tell me that it's a quote-unquote array the way that we humans talk about it. It will say, oh, it's an object in the sense that it can have other keys and other variables and other values. So type of is one way to do it, but it's not precise, right? Because as soon as you learn more about objects later on, objects are also objects and arrays are also objects. And sometimes you want to be clear about which one you want to iterate over. So the other one I like a lot more is array is array. So this one I won't go too deeply into except to tell you that notice how this first array is capitalized? That's what we call the array class, right? So when I make an array, what I'm really doing is I'm making an instance of that array class. But for now, just know that this is a much better way for us to check to see if something is an array, because you basically have what you make arrays out of, seeing if this is an instance of itself. So to call this, all you do is pass in the variable you're checking into this, and it will return back a boolean of true or false. Okay. Okay, cool. So what we're looking at here, arrays are basically a way for us to, like I said, add information into a list, right? And so right now what we're trying to do is we're trying to add another list into an existing list. Okay, so I'll do this one line at a time. Okay, once again we have our first array, right? It's just 1, 2, and 3, three numbers in sequence, one-dimensional, nothing fancy about it. And then I do this array.push. Just know that what .push is .push basically takes whatever you pass it, in this case another array, and it just tacks it onto the end of the existing array. So it will figure out where the array ends and just say, all right, let me just add one more variable to the end of that as another item in the list. So now when I print out array, it's going to give me 1, 2, 3, and it's also going to give me an array of 2 strings, which are what I just passed it previously, right? So now the data types are in this array. It's a number, a number, a number, and an array. And in this array, it's going to be a string and a string. Cool. So if I try to access this the third index in this array, 0 index is a number, first index is a number, second index is a number, array of 3, so index 3, that's going to be this other array, right? So now basically I have access to the second array, and now if I basically take this array and I ask you what the index 0 of that object is, what I'm basically asking you is, what is the first object in this? What is the first variable in this inner array? And all I have to do is I need to put these square brackets in sequence, right? So if you read it from left to right, it's saying, all right, this is the array. Give me the fourth element in it, and now give me the first element of that. And that's going to give me this one string, another. This is something else that is a little bit like trickier too, right? You can also access things in a string using the bracket notation as well, because in a lot of ways you access. Think of a string as an array of letters, right? So if I have a string and I say, hey, what's in the first index, or what's the first character of my string? I can just look that up really easily, right? And so if I take a look at this line down here, what it's telling me is, okay, take your original array, this whole thing up here, right? Give me the fourth item, okay, just a list. Give me the first item, okay, just a string. Now give me the fourth letter, which is of another, which is just the letter T, right? So in this way, you can kind of see how nested arrays can get more and more powerful, because essentially we have a way to add on infinite levels of complexity to a data structure, right? We just keep adding stuff inside over and over again until we can store what we want. Yeah, this is just telling you that we can do that. Cool. Okay, so this is a REPL that we can take a look at. How do we represent this grid in a code, right? When we look at this, and if I was to ask you, given what we just talked about with arrays, what do you think is one way that we could theoretically go about building out this grid? Yes.
An X and Y axis.
Okay, an X and Y axis, right? So we have a length, we have a height, we have a X, and we have a Y. Cool. What if I said, hey, don't worry about the height for now. What if I just want to give me like this first row right here, right? It's a first row of, we'll say 12 of length 12. What is that? Inherently? Right. Right. This first thing we could remember that very easily, was just an array, right? It's a list of 12 blank spaces. That's all it is, right? And then so now if I say, oh yeah, there's also like a height component to it, what is that then? Yes.
Just like the number of arrays?
Right, it's a number of arrays. What's another way we could visualize a number of arrays? Exactly, an array was an array. So if we have an array with 12 things in it, and each of those is an array of length 12, we essentially have this, right? Imagine if I have a square bracket up here and a closing bracket down here, right? And each one of these is a bracket with, just we'll say empty, undefined, whatever it is, but there's 12 things in each list, and I go down this list. Inherently, that's inherently what I'm trying to create here, right? Is that I'm basically creating this really massive list that has 12 or X number of lists inside of it. So rather than watching me do this, I'll just come to this and I'll use this to explain the previous problem first, and then I'll kind of go back and talk about what this is doing, or what are other things we can do with it too, okay? So essentially, this is our final output that we want, right? So we have a parent array out here, right? And within the array, each item in it is an array. I guess it was length 10. And each one of these is just a number, right? So before, we had a 10 by 10 grid, right? And here, we still have a 10 by 10 grid, right? It's just each row is of length 10, and there's 10 of these rows. So now I have a 10 by 10 grid. How are we doing this? Well, the way that we want to do it is, obviously, we want to start with our parent first. Like we need to create like our outer grid first, right? And that's very simple. It's just an empty array. Empty arrays are valid. They're also lists, or they're also arrays. And then here, I guess this is a little bit like clunkier, but we'll say, okay, let's just explicitly define what each row is, right? And we'll say it equals 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, okay? We can also do that with code later, which is one of the problems you'll be working on today in your exercise. But for now, let's say this is what each row is, right? If I say, hey, you know what? Can you make me 10 of these rows in a row? Well, I guess I could do, like grid dot push row and write that code 10 times in a row, right? It'll just say, all right, empty array, let me add to the end. It'll be the first item. All right, let's dot push again. Let's add a second row. It'll just add to the very end, and so on until we get to all 10 rows. Or we could do it, a little bit more elegantly with code, right? We say, all right, start at 0, and while you're less than 10, right? So 0 through 9. So there's 10 values, but the numbers is going to go from 0 to 9 rather than 1 to 10. And I'm going to increment I every time I go through this loop. And each time I do it, just do grid.push row. So it's just a very simple way to save me from typing, grid.push row 10 times in a row. And so if I do this 10 times, the first time it goes through the loop, it'll be an empty array. It will add this row to it. The second time, when I equals 1, it'll add this row. When I equals 2, it'll add this row, and so forth, all the way until I get to I equals 9. It will add this last row. And then at I equals 10, this will say, all right, you violated the conditions of my for loop. I'm done. And this is what we get. Does that make sense in terms of what this code is doing and how we're using a for loop to generate this grid? Everyone good still? Cool. And then just very simply now, how do we access a value in it? Give me the fourth element in this list. It doesn't really matter because they're all the same. So I give back this list. And then I'm saying, all right, once I have this list back, give me the 0th element in this, give me the 0th index, which is the first element, which is just going to be a 1. And this is how we get this, right? And so the really cool thing about this is that if I was to give you an x and y coordinate, so imagine earlier we had like the Cartesian, I guess we had like an xy plot, right? If I gave you an x and y coordinates, it's actually very simple for us to figure out like what value is at that coordinate, right? Because we know that the y coordinate is going to be this first index value, right? That's going to go, north south, if you will, and the second one is going to go left right or east west, right? So if I say give me the value at x equals 5 and y equals 2, that just says go to the second row, which is going to be next one, and then I forgot the number I said, but I think it was 5, right? So it just says, all right, now give me the fourth element in that. So grid of 2, bracket 2, bracket 4 is going to give us that number, right? And so we can very quickly leverage that to start accessing data a lot faster. Cool. Okay, cool. And then this is very simple to what we just showed you, except once this part up here is exactly identical to what we did earlier in terms of creating this grid. And now we're just saying, all right, let's go back through this grid all one more time, right? I equals 0, I is less than grid.length. Okay, so that will be, we have a grid of length 10, right? So this will be 10, so the max we're going to go is 9. Okay? And then for each of those, so now everything inside of here is going to give us a row of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. And then we're saying for each one of those arrays, do the same thing, except now we're not doing grid.length, we're doing that particular rows array.length. And all we're saying is, hey, log out for us, right? Log out grid of value I, and then grid of value j. That's all it is. And when we do that, we'll be able to print out what we saw earlier, or print out every single value in the grid. Does that make sense? Head nods, head shakes. Yes, question back.
Good.
Oh, you're good. Okay, cool. Does anyone have any questions at all? Because I'm about to start the workshop, so this will be one of the last chances for you to ask. At least in front of a public setting, which may be for the better or worse, I guess. Okay, but does arrays kind of make sense now of why we use arrays, how we use arrays, and why they're really powerful, right? Before, if I said, hey, can you create for me 100 variables, you would literally do var, a equals 100 times. And now we can just do it once, right? Well, I guess we can always do it with a for loop. But now if I said, give me a 2-dimensional data set, we can now do it like this. One of the really interesting to know that here we've created 10 rows with this for loop, right? We could also very easily create this row up here with a for loop as well, right? So in that case, in the layout for that might look very similar to this. Is that we have 2 for loops, each with 10 objects. So we do 10 we do 10 things twice, so that's 10 squared. So we get like 100 operations essentially. So we could very well easily generate the graph without having to explicitly define this row too, and you'll get a chance to do that down the road as well. Okay, last chance for questions before I open up the workshops about or anything about arrays. We're all good?
So the only method I guess we're concerned with is the push.
Yeah, okay, good question. So for now, for this workshop, I think dot push is the only one you'll need to know. And what dot push does is dot push just automatically adds it to the end of the array. But remember how we iterate over the array, you can still assign numbers. So theoretically, that is like a way to do a replace as well, is to reassign that index to a different value. Yes.
So just to be clear, the first for loop puts the numbers horizontally, and then the second one puts the numbers vertically.
For this one down here, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So yeah. So just remember that, and let's go back here. It'll be a lot easier to see it from here. Okay. So the first one is say, okay, for every item in your list, right? And we're doing grid, right? So all of this is grid, right? So this first list, that is the first item in grid. This list, or sorry, this array here, this is the second array in grid. This is the third array in grid, etc., right? So for this first loop, what we're doing is we're basically taking each grid, or we're basically going to be saying, okay, for this grid value, for this grid of I, right? Notice how like the entire point of this for loop is for us to get I bigger and bigger, so we make sure we cover every single element in the grid, right? And the grid is just a list. So we say, okay, the I is going to be 0 through 9, right? And then get me that array back, and then let's loop over it. So yes, the short answer. So the short answer is yes. First, we're going, row at least in this visual, we're going vertically down, and then we're going within it across. Okay. Any other questions? All right, awesome. I will make pairs. I will get the workshops open. Feel free to go to the bathroom, and then yeah, definitely ping me or Sean if you have any questions. I think you guys have used the help desk for a few days now. I think it should be all up and running. So feel free to do that. If you also want to just raise your hands, that's totally cool too. Yeah, we'll take like a 2-minute break, and then we come back. I'll get the workshop started. I'll give you who your partners are, and then feel free to start whenever you're ready. Thanks.